So ladies and gentlemen, George Rush St Pierre is back and returning to combat sports. No, unfortunately, he's not returning to the UFC to come back to reclaim a title. George St Pierre is 42 years old now, but he is returning at the Fight Pass Invitational, which is a grappling event that the UFC has put on a few times now. The Fight Pass Invitational is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu dominated, and it's had the likes of Gordon Ryan and recently Craig Jones, who are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu icons, competing and taking this sport to the next level. Now, with the Fight Pass Invitational, George St Pierre is competing in a no-gi format, and no-gi is just a style of fighting where there's no gripping of the clothing, so similar to what grappling is within the UFC within that aspect. And this recent news did create some speculation on if we would actually see GSP versus Khabib Nurmagomedov in the Fight Pass Invitational 6 that GSP is going to be competing against, but unfortunately GSP did pour some cold water on that idea. As we know, Khabib Nurmagomedov did retire a few years ago against Justin Gaethje after losing his father, one of the greatest combat athletes that we've seen of our time. But as GSP did mention, Khabib Nurmagomedov has put on some considerable size at this point, so he's basically a heavyweight. So unfortunately, us fans are not going to get that fight in any way, shape or form, not even in a no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappling match. It's really great that the UFC is pushing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think it will be much more beneficial and more suitable to their specific brand than Dana White putting all of this effort into Power Slap, which isn't a competitive martial art or sport in any way, shape or form. You know, even at the recent press conference, we've seen Dana White wearing a Power Slap t-shirt for Volkanovski versus Rodriguez, and the press conference there for UFC 290. It just makes you think, come on mate, give it a rest. No one cares about your Power Slap. Stop posting it all over social media. And maybe Dana White should start wearing some Fight Pass Invitational shirts at his press conferences instead. I think this is going to be very beneficial for former fighters to push Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a competitive grappling sport and take it to new heights. We've seen the ADCC come on the block, which is one of the biggest grappling events of the world, which has taken Jiu-Jitsu to a new level. And having these big stars like GSP, Glover Teixeira and Anthony Smith start competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments is only going to make the sport more popular. So unfortunately, we're not going to get our wish and see GSP return inside the octagon, but he is 42 years of age. So I think it's probably a blessing in disguise that we're not going to get this wish, because at 42 years of age, GSP in all likelihood wouldn't be the same fighter we remember. So it's good for his legacy at this point, I think, to leave mixed martial arts in the rearview mirror. I know it's incredibly hard to see GSP losing a fight, considering he's the most dominant fighters in UFC history, at least one of, if not the greatest. But it's good that he's sort of left it behind now so he doesn't taint his legacy, because we have seen former fighters taint their legacy quite a bit. The likes of Tony Ferguson and BJ Penn. BJ Penn kept fighting a lot longer than what he should have, and Tony Ferguson is at that point right now. So I think this is a great move. Going into the grappling landscape where he's not going to take as much damage on his body, the consequences are a lot less severe than what they are within a mixed martial arts bout. Now, of course, injuries can happen, but I think this is a smart move from GSP because it still ignites that competitive fire within him and without him risking that injury. But what do you guys think of the Fight Pass Invitational? Do you think Jiu-Jitsu is going to take off a little bit more as a sport? I think personally, it's never going to be like a mainstay, massive sport of the world or anything like that, purely because if you don't understand grappling, it's not a very spectator-friendly sport to a lot of fans if they don't understand what's happening. So I think if they change the rule sets a little bit, I think it can take it to the next level. But as it stands right now, I think it will get a bit more popular, but I just don't see it being like a mainstay sport like the UFC is or anything like that. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Now, if you guys do want to up your athleticism and prevent some injuries in your training, feel free to check out my free ebook, Combat Training Essentials. The link is in the description. And as we know, UFC 290 is less than 24 hours away. I'm absolutely stoked for this. And recent news, unfortunately, Jack Della Maddalena has lost his opponent for UFC 290, so it looks like he's not going to be competing on that card. As an Aussie, that's a bit of a disappointment, but we've got a few Aussie boys competing on this card. I'm looking forward to seeing how they represent our country in the next 24 hours. I'm expecting fireworks at this main event, guys. And if you do want to see my breakdowns for these fights on these cards, feel free to check out any one of these videos here. Get yourself pumped up. I'll be doing some post-fight shows as well after the event, give you my thoughts on it. But thanks very much for tuning in, everyone, and I'll catch you all later.